Welcome to the Mystery College Podcast. Today we're interviewing Miguel Conner. Miguel is an expert in Gnosticism and the host of AEON BYTE GNOSTIC RADIO. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being on. Can you share a little bit about what started you on this journey of exploring Gnosticism and starting the AEON BYTE GNOSTIC Radio?
Well, I would say I've always been a seeker. Since I was a kid, I was interested in the larger questions of life. Why are we here? What happens after death? What's the meaning of suffering, evil, and so forth? So I was always a curious soul, and I always felt sort of an outcast, regardless of where I was, what I was doing. So I would lean towards things like comic books, science fiction, music, and stuff like that. And as I got older, I started embracing, I was raised Roman Catholic, but I started sort of exploring other religions, studying a lot of mythology, going to things like ashrams and mosques just to experience other cultures. And at the end of the day, I mean, I pretty much wore all hats or explored everything from, I was an atheist for a while, New Ager, you name it, but it really was Gnosticism that sort of really fit my ideas and what I was exploring and all the answers that I needed. And it's not perfect. All religious systems have holes in them and paradoxes and all that. But Gnosticism came close to satisfying what I was seeking. And the podcast was one of those you might say exercises. I was, this is way before the podcast era. I was learning about Gnosticism, studying like the Nag Hammadi Library, reading Elaine Pagels, the Gnostic Gospels, and all that good stuff. And I decided, well, I'm learning. I want to share this very cool stuff I like. So I simply started calling up scholars and translators of the Nag Hammadi Library, individuals like Elaine Pagels, Bart Ehrman, and so forth, and they were very happy to talk to me. And I would just, I would put them out. I had a slot back then on this internet radio called Free Thought Media, which was mostly atheists, but they did some politics, alternative spirituality, and I had like a scheduled show there, put it on my website, and I just sort of started doing this pretty much part-time until 2018. Late 2018 when I decided to go full time, but it was just one of those, it wasn't even money making or anything like that. It was just like, I want to share what I learn. And periodically I'd put out a podcast and one thing led to another.
Yeah, amazing. One thing led to another. And it sounds like you like went through a whole spectrum journey of exploring Eastern, Western traditions, even experiencing like being an atheist for a while. And then you came into Gnosticism and found that felt nourishing, that felt quenching for your thirst for knowledge. Can you share about like, are there any books in the Nag Hammadi Library or in any scriptures that particularly speak to you?
Well, to me, it would have to be the Secret Book of John, because I think it's the most exhaustive and in a way high weirdness of all the texts. It really has everything. It's got the Gnostic myths. It's got Sophia, Jesus, the Archons. It's got the Book of Enoch. It rewrites or reinterprets the story of Genesis, the creation before creation, when consciousness becomes alert or manifests itself, very Hindu or even Platonic. And it's got everything. I know it's not for everybody because, again, sometimes it reads like a feverish psychedelic dream, but there is a structure and a rhythm to it. I think for most people, how their entry drug might be something like the Gospel of Thomas, which is closer to the canonical Bible, but it still has that sort of mystic bend to it. It's a very different Jesus than you find it. But I would say that. Maybe Thunder Perfect Mind, which is really one of the most unique texts that you'll find in ancient religion, which is basically this first person diatribe of a goddess, and she speaks about her fall and a redemption and how she's coming back. It's a really beautiful poetic treatise. So I'm partial to that one too.
Yeah, that sounds like fascinating. And I don't think a lot of people those who don't really have exposure to Nag Hammadi libraries or other Gnostic source texts understand like how these books have a lot of thoughts that are contrary to what more Orthodox religions commonly think of. But the fact of the matter is that these texts, a lot of them were dated and made around the same time as a lot of the earliest books in the New Testament, for example. What do you know about like some of the timeline of books releasing?
That's up for debate.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, I mean, we have to understand, despite the Nag Hammadi Library being discovered in 1945, it took a long time to get these texts together, translate them. Some texts got lost. There was a couple of texts that ended up with Carl Jung, and these had to be returned. So we didn't get the first English translation till like 1979. And considering it's 55 ancient texts, I mean, the Bible's had centuries, or the Quran, or the Hebrew Bible. The Nag Hammadi Library, you're looking at a couple of generations. So it's still a lot of conjecture and discovery. I mean, there are those who place many of the texts in the first century, some place them in the second or third century. So things are always shifting. I mean, some scholars believe that the Gospel of Thomas, because it's just a sayings gospel, is actually a first century, that it was something that was being passed around with the canonical Gospels, late first century. Others say, no, this was taken from the canonicals, and this sort of listicle was created in the second century. So there is still a lot to learn. I myself kind of fall in the early dating, maybe first century with some of the texts. But again, still, there are so many insights and realizations and other things to find out about the Nag Hammadi Library. We've only just begun.
No, we've only just begun. And I wonder about like your experience in talking with, all the leading experts in the field. But what do you feel like is the consensus around a lot of the Gnostic texts or interpretations of the worldview, and what are some things that are kind of still for debate?
Well, there isn't much consensus. I mean, it's at this moment in time, most biblical scholars or scholars of comparative religion know nothing, barely anything about the Gnostic Gospels. I probably know more about them. So there's almost like there's maybe a handful, a few dozen scholars who really have a grasp to it. So and their points really diverge, and opinions diverge. When scholars thought about Gnosticism in the 60s, when the Nag Hammadi was still sort of, it was harder to get translations. It's changed a lot. And from now, there have been scholars who've even said there was never a Gnosticism. These were just independent alternative Christians. Other scholars say, no, there was this movement and it started here in Christian times. Others say, no, it started before Christianity. So there's still not, you might say, a consensus. I mean, there was a time when pre-Nag Hammadi Library times, scholars said, the Gnostics came out of Egypt or Zoroastrianism. Then it sort of shifted and it became more popular to say, well, they broke out from Christianity probably in the second century. It was a Christian heresy. Now it's starting to shift again, where they're saying, no, it looks like the Gnostics really did come from Egypt, and they were tapping into ancient Egyptian mystery. So it's fun to see how it changes.
Yeah, that's cool to see how the narrative changes and differing opinions and differing perspectives. People and scholars are going into different directions with it through either interpretation or their research. So one question I have is on the note, like where do some people like to go into the Gnostic texts and infer things and then practice like meditations or spiritual practices with the basis of the Gnostic texts, and others interpret it very much metaphorically and more just as pure theology. I'm wondering what are some models that you've explored or presented or have heard from listeners or the scholars about either like how people practice these texts, and how do people maybe practice them today?
Well, we do have the rituals in incomplete forms in the texts themselves, and we also have the church fathers and heresy hunters also recorded some of their rituals. So we do have that. It's obviously, again, it's incomplete because we don't have the exact incense they used or materials or what they were doing. To Gnosticism, obviously, the central technology, spiritual technology, would be gnosis, the Greek from knowledge, but it's not standard knowledge, as you might say, a special type of knowledge, a direct experience with higher intelligences or an expansion of consciousness to see reality for what it is and even be able to transcend reality and explore higher realms. That is what gnosis is. And it should be mentioned, too, that Gnosticism was an experiential type of religion. As mentioned, they tapped into the ancient Egyptian mysteries. They had a mystery vibe to them. And at its core, Gnosticism is pretty shamanistic. If we can tell something about a commonality in the rituals, is that these individuals were going into ecstatic trances and sort of leaving their bodies or traveling to other worlds or changing their very personas, if you would. So it is a shamanistic religion. It is about experiencing the divine and not just sort of doing these rituals and hoping for some sort of reward in the afterlife or a better world in this dimension or whatever. I think that what confounds many people is the variety of rituals that the Gnostics had. That's because Gnosticism has always been very individualistic, almost very anarchist, very sort of secret society. In other words, it posits that every individual is different and every individual is within a culture that has certain rituals or traditions that they might be comfortable with. So the Gnostic attitude was, first comes gnosis, self-knowledge, the knowledge that you are God and that we live in a simulation and that we have the ability to transcend this world and commune with a higher God or a higher force because part of that God is within us. We have this divine spark, this shard of infinity within us, and we can unleash it and reach our potential. The question is, how do you do it? So as we see, the Gnostics seem to have been spread out into these lodges across the Greco-Roman Empire. And although they had similar theologies and attitudes and worldviews, the rituals changed. So, for example, in Egypt, these individuals might do things like sex magic or alchemy, where in Rome, they might do something that's closer to ancient Christianity, sacramental religions. Other Gnostics had exercises like contemplation. Some used psychedelics, it seems. Some used philosophical inquiry, like Plato asked, to reach a mystical experience. So you see these varied sort of traditions and all of these varied rituals and all these lodges that was usually headed by some sort of hierophant, like the Hermeticists did. And the hierophant would teach this group how to attain gnosis. So in other words, gnosis was the central part, and everything else, as scholar April DeConnick said, was throw everything in the kitchen sink until you can have this gnosis, this out-of-body experience to commune with this sort of alien God that the Gnostics believed in.
Mm. Yeah, and with that emphasis on gnosis and knowledge, both within the self but also outside of oneself through the cosmos, So all these different Gnostic groups and clusters that were in different geographies had different paths to attainment. Some used meditation methods and self-inquiry, or psychedelics, and so on. So how does what is the chief way that the acquisition of Sophia or knowledge differ fundamentally with the Gnostics as opposed to mainline Christianity at that time and modernity?
Well, again, we can just look at, let's look at Jesus, how they view Jesus. In Gnosticism, it is assumed that the individual is asleep, that the individual is suffering from amnesia, that the individual who houses the divine spark has been trapped in this world, which is more like a simulation. It's not a false reality, it's a fake reality. It's been coded to keep us trapped here, to keep us asleep, so that these beings that have either created this world or usurped this world, which the Gnostics call the archons, are using to feed upon us, or our very souls, you might say, fuel this universe, kind of like in the Matrix, where it's our brain electricity that fuels the Matrix. And we are trapped here. So therefore, the goal of Gnosticism is to be saved from ignorance. As the Gospel of Philip, which is in the Nag Hammadi Library, says, the mother of all sin is ignorance, that we have forgotten who we are and how divine we are is the great sin. And we have to wake up to that, which is part of what Gnosis does. Our experiencing higher worlds makes us lose this amnesia and wake up, and to our destiny, to our true essence. And Jesus didn't come here to save us from hell or save us from sin or anything like that. His sacrificial death was meaningless to the Gnostics. He came here to wake us up. So when Jesus descends into this world, which can happen many times, is not just a one-time thing. He can appear as a human or some sort of muse, and he helps us, again, not save us from sin or save our souls, but help us wake us up. So that's the big difference between, let's say, Orthodox Christianity and Gnostic Christianity, although there were other forms of Gnosticism like Hermeticism, which was more pagan, and so forth.
That focus on waking up, and this idea of everyone being like asleep and coming to be awake, and a different idea of Jesus's resurrection. That's awesome. So then,
it's always said, the resurrection, don't wait for the resurrection to happen when you die. In order to be saved, you must resurrect while still alive. By resurrect, I mean you must become self-actualized or individuated like this Jesus. As the Gospel of Philip says, you saw Christ, you become Christ. Christ was seen as the ultimate self-actualized being that we could be like. I mean, even Paul, who had a lot of Gnostic tendencies, and when you read his letters, he always says, we must have the mind of Christ.
We must have the mind of Christ in the sense of connecting to that, like that gnosis of Christ, that wisdom, that Sophia of Christ, and embodying it. I wonder, there must be quite a few different interpretations of that.
Yeah, I'm sure there were. I mean, everybody experiences mysticism different, right? People have the same experience. That's what another thing I like about Gnosticism. It's really up to the individual. There's no one size fits all. Even in their text, they might disagree on what exactly the higher realms look like, or what did Jesus look like, or what it means to be awake. And I think that's what I like, because again, there's no one size fits all, or we all must believe in the same thing. There's room for variation because each one of us has a very unique spiritual constitution.
Absolutely. And so Gnosticism often portrays the material world as like an illusion of or creation of the lesser deity that you'd mentioned before. And part of the idea is it's kind of like the Matrix, where we're feeding these deities, these archons. So how does this kind of approach to the worldview of Gnosticism approach to help influence the approach to life, spirituality, day-to-day living for either maybe an ancient Gnostic and maybe a more modern day Gnostic?
Well, if you know you're in a prison, you've got it, and you finally accept it, you'll find a way to get out, right? I mean, it's like what do they say about alcoholics? I'm a recovering alcoholic. Until you realize there's a problem, you're not going to do something about it, or you're not going to take it seriously. So the Gnostics took a very intense view of suffering and evil, kind of like the Buddhists did in many of their dispensations. And they simply said, look, the good news says that we are divine. We have part of us that is infinite. The bad news is that we forgot, and we got to remember this and slowly, gradually wake up. Get out of Plato's cave. I mean, the Gnostics obviously, Plato's cave is one great, Plato's cave allegory is one great Gnostic narrative. So, excuse me. So we got to wake up to get out. And this takes a very strong drive, a thrust to really work on your inner self, and a thrust to see reality for what it is, to deprogram ourselves from what society, from what our parents, from culture has done to us, to make us at worst average, to make us docile and part of the machinery that is not only society, but the entire universe. And Gnosticism says, no, you can break out of this and not just escape the universe, but become fully individuated, again, a Christ where you can help others wake up. You can help others heal physically, mentally, psychologically. The Gnostics were very about psychological healing and trauma healing, if you would. So that sort of sense of urgency is what I like, and I think that's what drove the Gnostics and made them so dangerous, a threat to so many religious institutions and even secular institutions. I mean, most religions, and that's why I was turned off to them, are like, well, here we are, we'll just make the best of it. We just have to have faith, and we'll do the best we can while we're down here on earth, and we'll either reincarnate in a better aspect, or we'll go to a nicer place after we die, or whatever. The Gnostics had this amazing sort of warrior mentality to them, which combined with their shamanistic rituals really made them, I don't know, exciting, transgressive, and I would say right in the end. I mean, let's face it, they were mocked 2,000 years ago in the West. Obviously, in the East, their ideas would be more common or more accepted, but in the West, the idea of a simulation ruled by these haughty over star lords, these lords of fate, was very controversial. But as we're finding out today with mathematics and science, the simulation reality is now very accepted within scientific communities. I mean, whether it's Neil deGrasse Tyson, who says that there's a high probability we're in a simulation. Elon Musk has said there's a 99% chance that we are in a simulation. And of course, yeah, that's great. But what's outside of the simulation? Who coded this program, this virtual reality place we are in? And why did they do such a bad job? Why is there suffering and child porn and cancer and tsunamis and all that stuff? What's going on? And that's the questions that the Gnostics were asking 2,000 years ago and have been asking throughout history, whether it's modern Gnostics like Philip K. Dick, or ancient Gnostics, or medieval Gnostics like the Kabbalists and the Sufis and the Cathars. So that's where we are. And again, that's why I like or gravitated towards Gnosticism, because they were right, I feel, and they give you that really sense of urgency to finding out why we suffer and why there is evil.
Yeah, I think they're absolutely about asking the right questions and having an eagerness and an urgency. There's such an important component about making transformation in life, society, and then that also bridges to the point, like, why did this Demiurge mess up so badly? And can you share a little bit about the Gnostic Demiurge and Gnostic theology? and how this concept tradition kind of challenges the traditional view of God and Judaic thought or Christian thought.
Well, it was very controversial. I mean, the idea of a demiurge was very ancient. It comes from Plato, when it says the one, when it became aware, there was all this leftover material and this being called the demiurge kind of put it together and created our universe. And other religions, the idea of this creator God who's kind of managing the universe. And it doesn't matter the religion, this being was considered good. The creator gods were good. Uh, but the Gnostics suddenly came out and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, 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 no. This place is shit. And at the very least, it's not well managed. It's a rickety universe where, again, the laws sometimes don't make any sense. Life doesn't make any sense. Like, why is there suffering? Why is there temporality? Why do all these strange things happen? And they really, you might say, threw down the gauntlet and said these creator managerial gods suck. And there's got to be something higher that we can reach to. And if we're awake, it maybe means was never our home in the first place. And if we feel there's another home that we belong to, why don't we go there now instead of waiting till we die and rolling the dice in some bardo and so forth? And the Gnostics saw the Demiurge as the head honcho of this universe, and they mostly associated him with the God of the Hebrew Bible, the God who, creates plagues and kills people and gives droughts and sends a bear to kill 42 children who were bothering Elijah. This sort of very temperamental and narcissistic deity. They saw him as basically sort of a demon, and they said, the Gnostics probably started as Jews. They said these texts have been written wrong, they've been misinterpreted, and the truth is there is another God. There's probably a goddess Sophia, and this Demiurge, this Yahweh, is the bad guy, or he shouldn't be in charge of the universe. And the angels that worked for him, they called archons, the term for rulers, who were sort of his goon buddies who were running this universe and not doing a very good job. Some Gnostics, of course, said the same thing about other gods. They were like, Zeus and Saturn and Osiris, they're all part of the same mafia, and they're just doing a terrible job with this universe. We want to go to the one, Plato. We want to go beyond there because they don't make any sense. And I said it was controversial, but I'm finding out it probably wasn't that controversial, because we have to understand that something that was pretty dominant in those days was the Book of Enoch. It was dominant in pagan circles even. It was accepted in Christian and Jewish circles to an extent. I mean, Paul talks about angels telling women in Corinthians, cover yourself because these angels, these watchers will come and they'll mate with you and create Nephilim. The Epistle of Jude talks about the Nephilim and the Watchers. And we find it more in other writings that there was this common idea that these angels, these archons, these had somehow mismanaged the universe, they'd taken over the universe, or they'd been put in charge of the universe, or they were fallen, rebellious angels, and they were just screwing things up. And the Gnostics sort of took that vibe and created their own mythologies too. Now, obviously, the Book of Enoch and these traditions got suppressed because it became kind of embarrassing to, it became embarrassing to blame. If this happened, why did the creator God allow it? I mean, if these managers were screwing up the universe, how come does that mean the CEO of the universe is blameless? No, he allowed it to happen. So these traditions got taken out of Christianity and Judaism. Like, no, everything's fine. It's all part of God's plan. There were never these angels ruling things, or if there were angels, we threw them down in hell. And once in a while they come up to cause havoc on earth. But for the most part, God is in charge. And the Gnostics were, very, very stern. Like, no, these angels, these beings are still in charge. These archons or fallen angels or watchers or whatever, aliens, extraterrestrials. They're in charge and they're screwing things up.
Mm, mm. So like, I'm wondering, like, the CEO, like the Demiurge is in charge, and there's all these different archons, and there's these archons that are divided over celestial bodies, these different layers, fabrics in the cosmos. So, is there a tradition in Gnosticism where people will, like, say, astral project, wander, or they connect to different celestial spheres, planetary spheres, and ascend a hierarchy, if you will, or to attain gnosis or to leave the matrix?
Yeah, I mean, I told you with the rituals, they were shamanistic. That's what the shaman did in ancient times. He leaves his body and he goes into the spiritual world for information or insights or secrets or other things to bring back to the tribe. And the Gnostics certainly did that, except in theirs, they were traveling through these spheres of reality to make contact with this alien god, which was basically the font of being, the true information, the true good that there existed. And they were part of a very hallowed tradition back then that included the Hermeticists, the Neoplatonists, Merkabah Jews, the people who were in the cult of Mithras, and so forth. Again, this sort of mystery religion, shamanistic aspect of all these religions that was about leaving your body and going exploring the spirit world. Go on an adventure, and we know what happens with all these adventures. It's the monomyth. We find ourselves at the end. We find our true selves and our true purpose and where we are aligned to God and everything else.
Mm. 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 So, what are some of the key symbols and like myths in Gnosticism? Like, would you mind explaining like a few key symbols used in Gnostic literature and what they represent?
Well, you've got the Ouroboros is a big one. And that one is, of course, popular in ancient Egyptian mysticism, Hermeticism, and that's the snake biting its tail. They had different versions of it. Like some Gnostic sects thought this Ouroboros was evil. It represented karma, that this giant serpent was like Apophis of the Egyptian lore, which he would either devour souls or he was keeping everybody trapped in the material world. Other Gnostics saw the serpent as a divine being, as actually a bringer of wisdom that was helping the universe. In some other texts, the serpent in the garden is actually the good guy. The serpent is the one that helps Adam and Eve wake up to their true nature and realize that they've been slaves all along to this haughty and arrogant demiurge that wants to use them as slaves or food or whatever. And the serpent is seen as a benign creature in many of their texts, and many of their sects were called after snakes. There's, for example, the Nassenes were a Gnostic sect, and that means serpent in Hebrew. There was another sect called the Ophites, and Ophion means serpent in Greek, and according to the church fathers, they would start their rituals by having a snake come out, and they would kiss the snake on the mouth and have the snake go around them. So the serpent motif is very prevalent in Gnostic myths. Serpents are obviously connected to the moon, to the underworld, to the mystical realms, and often to the Gnostic goddess Sophia herself. So that's one. The Ankh is another one, but again, I keep saying the Gnostics came from the ancient Egyptian mystery, so of course this was these symbols would be important, alchemical symbols, others. But again, it varies between sects because they all had different approaches, different rituals, and so forth. So it depended on the Hierophant or what worked for the Gnostics.
So then, can you share a little bit about like a little more about some contemporary Gnostic practices? So you'd be using like the Nag Hammadi Library or the Book of John as basis of practice.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at the secret book of John, Jesus is basically tells a story to the Apostle John about the truth of creation, the truth of Genesis and all that. And he's going about the Nephilim and all these things and how the Demiurge created fate and death and what a mess we are in. But then suddenly there is this prayer to the goddess, and it's this beautiful poem where you hear these chanting, "Oh, here comes the goddess," and the goddess Sophia appears, and she's like, "Wake up, everybody! Come out of your grave," which is Earth, and this and that, and you see this in a lot of Gnostic and Hermetic texts. And what it is, there probably was some sort of ritual where, like the mystery religions, you dress up as the goddess Sophia. You might have somebody dressing up as the Demiurge, and it was very theatrical, as they did in ancient times, and you sort of did this ritual. There was probably some sort of entheogen or incense and music, and you just recreated it, and that would bring you the mystical experience. And then, of course, you look at other rituals. They have things like vowels. You have Jesus is explaining Sophia and waking up, and suddenly it says, "Now say this, Ayu," and it's like pages of Iau. And scholars have said that obviously vowels spoken in the right context and the right with the right energy and atmosphere can bring a altered state of mind. And so you have these vowel magic going on, and then suddenly Jesus or Hermes or whoever the figure is in this text will say, "All right, now stop. Now listen and be quiet. Now meditate for this amount of time. And then let's say a prayer." And then this ritual goes on of reenacting this grand mythology and so forth. So it's all there, but again, only in a few texts they might give you the plants they use, but another text they don't show what ingredients they did or where they did it. And I'm sure a lot of them were done on top of like a sky, a beautiful maybe summer sky, or they were done underground in a cave or something. We don't have the exact mechanics of these rituals, but we can tell by that they were for altered states of mind, to leave your body, to sort of healing. There's a lot of healing rituals for your body and your mind, but again, we don't have enough to recreate them. Today, it's hard. I mean, I would say you have the Mandeans, which is, if you want an unbroken lineage of Gnosticism, the Mandeans who lived in Iraq and suffered so much under Saddam Hussein and ISIS and all that. They are there, but they're very baptizing. They probably come from the lineage of John the Baptist, and they're all about baptizing and prayer. And we don't know what it is. I mean, one thing the Gnostics talk a lot about is baptism, but it's a very mysterious baptism. Scholars have wondered, was the baptism, because some texts have them like they're being baptized by the goddess in another realm. Another one says you baptize and you have to put these ointments in your face. We don't know exactly what happens. I think maybe it was some sort of forced drowning, like waterboarding, where they would do it really fast, and you would go into an altered state of mind. So we have the Mandeans, but their rituals have changed and they're kind of sterilized, very much like, many Christian rituals are not the same that were 2,000 years ago. Like the Catholic Mass is much different than it was even 2 generations ago. But we really don't have anything. I tell individuals, it's very simple. Do what works for you. Again, the central theme is gnosis, self-knowledge. How are you going to wake up? How are you going to leave your body and make contact with higher realms? And what works for you is not going to work for somebody else. So find things that work for you that will lead to gnosis, to understanding that the universe is a simulation, to understanding like the shamans, that you can go out and make contact with spirits, that you can listen to your soul to tell you what your purpose is and how you need to heal, and then go for it and maybe start a small group, a small lodge, and then do these rituals. But I can't, no Gnostic would ever give you sort of a listicle or, how to do it, because again, everybody's different and each of our journeys is different. And what works for you might not work for you. I've done ayahuasca, has worked really well for me, but I have people that they hate it. I like meditation, but I know people who can't do it. They would rather do something else like walking contemplation or ceremonial magic. We're all different, and it really depends. But that's the whole point, right? People want self-knowledge, but they want somebody to give them the list to self-knowledge, which is kind of doesn't make sense, does it? Right? Self-knowledge is your journey.
Yeah,
Got to do it yourself, because you have to respect those who brought us the tools and use these tools and honor them and try them. I mean, if I go do a ayahuasca ritual, or I go to a meditation, or I do the tarot to help me understand where my soul is, I respect these people. I subjugate myself to them, but then I use these and incorporate different ones for my own practice. It's not, you don't have to be alone, and you shouldn't be alone. You just have to honor and stand on the shoulders of different mystics and then incorporate them into your life so you can reach God or your true self or your daemon in a way that works for you and only you.
absolutely. That process of individualization in Gnosticism seems so core. See, and that there's no listicle, there's no one layer process that is going to work for everybody. Contemplate walking, magic. There's so many different pathways to the same end result.
Yeah, I used to hate it. People give me the answers and I follow it instead of doing all the work myself.
Yeah. So, in your opinion and from your perspective or experience, what do you feel at this time is one of the misunderstood aspects of Gnosticism by the general public?
Oh, there's quite a few. I mean, the Gnostics were called world haters, but what the Gnostics hated was false worlds. They wanted to see the real world. They did not want any lies. So they're always trying to break down reality and see the truth about it. And when you read their texts, whether it's some of their texts are hardcore with a lot of dark themes and sexual violence and just horrible things. I mean, they dial it up to 11, but there's this beautiful sense of joy and happiness and hope to these texts. There's these wonderful prayers, and Jesus is very different than the Orthodox Jesus, because if you read the New Testament, Jesus never laughs or does anything, but this Gnostic Jesus, he's out there dealing with the archons, and he's laughing, he's dancing, he likes to hang out with Mary Magdalene and kiss her on the mouth. He's having a blast, and there's this amazing joy that shows that these individuals made contact with something so much greater than this world, but at the same time they have this amazing compassion for this world that they want to help others heal. They want to wake others. There are texts where they talk about how they can't even walk on grass because they see God is in grass and all the animals are beautiful and so forth. So people think that the Gnostics were all these dark, emo kind of people who just hated everything, and it's so far from the truth. I mean, Gnosis will bring this amazing joy that you'll never experience. Others have called, Satori or enlightenment or something like that. It's just, you'll be flooded with this positive force.
That's beautiful. And in your perspective, having many scholars, what do you feel maybe one of the most misunderstood aspects of Gnosticism by people who are scholars or researchers who are so close to the material?
That's a good question. Again, there's so many splits, I can't even say, because there's scholars that have different stances. I guess, again, scholars who think that Gnosticism was this sort of 2nd century heresy, I think, are off the mark. I think the Gnostics were probably dissatisfied Hellenistic Jews who were seeking something greater. And in Egypt, they began connecting with Egyptian priests, and they began creating together this sort of new theology. and these ancient Egyptian mysteries from Hermes and so forth were handed down to them. And so therefore, Gnosticism really is very ancient. It's almost primordial, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So for someone interested in exploring Gnosticism further, what are some texts or resources you'd recommend as a starting point, like Nag Hammadi Library or certain books within the Nag Hammadi Library, other texts?
I'd say stay away from it. In your life, it's going to upend your life, and whatever you thought was important in your life, career and all that, is going to go by the wayside if you have enough gnosis. So if you're happy with this life, just stay away from it and stick to all these other kind of average religions and hope for the next. No, again, it depends on the person. I can't even say. I would say go to my website, thegodabovegod.com, and on the menu, in one of the entries, I forget where I have a recommended reading list where I break it down like, beginning books. There's philosophical Gnostic books, or if fiction is a way to go, then I have things like Philip K. Dick, start with Valis, or start with Alan Moore, or there's a Neil Gaiman. There's different ways that you can approach Gnosticism that might help you. I mean, go watch movies like The Matrix or The Truman Show or season 1 of Westworld or so forth. Those are other ways where you might be able to get Gnosticism. I would tell people to get, before you even read the Nag Hammadi Library, do that.
Yeah, I can really see what you mean by that, because that makes me wonder how Gnosticism after evolved in the modern era. Do you see a resurgence or growing interest in Gnostic beliefs through media, like people's like the metaverse, or shows like the Truman Show, Westworld, World?
For sure. I mean, again, what the Gnostics warned about has come true. We do sort of live in a simulation. We have this feeling like Morpheus tells Neo, there's something wrong with the world. You just don't know what it is. It's like a splinter in your mind driving you mad. It's like we know that there's something wrong with the leaders of this country. There's something wrong with our religious exemplars. It feels like things are off, and we wonder who's pulling the strings at the top. How real is our reality? At the same time, we know that there's something within us that is so much better, and we just need to find out who we are. I mean, yeah, self-knowledge has become very important in the West. Shadow work has become very important. Carl Jung, who was obviously, his psychoanalysis ideas are based or have a foundation in Gnosticism, are very popular. And these Gnostic ideas have become very popular, of course, in culture and a lot of movies. I mentioned a few, but there's certainly a lot others that are extremely Gnostics, from the TV show Severance. The first Lego movie is very Gnostic. I mean, you see it all. Video games, Gnosticism themes are very popular. Comic books, they've always been, and so forth. So it's almost like we are in Gnostic times, as I often say on my podcast.
We are in Gnostic times. Absolutely. So, is there any last pieces of advice or recommendations you'd give to folks who may be interested in pursuing Gnosticism further? Like, what are the next steps?
Well, I would say it all goes back to that maxim at the Temple of Delphi, at the Temple of Apollo, that says, know thyself. I think that's the key to the universe, right? I am 100%, I guarantee 100%, I would sell my soul to tell you that each one of us has a mission, an amazing mission. We're not here by accident. We're here to restore the universe. Even if this world is a prison or simulation, we were put here because we were a threat to somebody, because we are valuable to somebody that they have to keep us in some cosmic ranch. So all of us have value. All of us have a purpose, a sacred purpose. All of us don't even know who we are. And once we do, that's when the true things get more challenging, but there's a peace in knowing who we are and where we're meant to go and how we are meant to heal this universe and help others wake up. So each one of us has this mission, and it's, again, it really is about self-knowledge, quieting all the noise around you, deprogramming yourself from all the magic and delusions that this world has told us, and realizing that we are so much more than we could ever imagine. So I would say that's it. Know thyself. I mean, there's a quote, two quotes that are in my head recently. One of is by Bukowski, and he said, what did he say? I have it right here. There's that thing. It's right here. Find what you love and let it kill you. It's very simple. And that, of course, means, you die to your old self and something new comes. The other one is everything you ever wanted is on the other side of fear. So it's all there for you. And each one of us, without exception in this world, 8 billion people, has that potential. So your listeners, you, me, we have it. And things are going to be great on the other side of fear.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. And so people can find you on your site, godabovegod.com. They can look up AEON BYTE Radio. What are some other social medias, YouTube, podcasts,
Well,
other things?
It's all there on my website, or when you do AEON BYTE, you'll see a list of where I am on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Yeah. But if you go to my site, you'll see my books, social media channels, videos, my recommended book list. It's all there, however you want to approach it, or you can send me a contact form and ask me questions, whatever, however you want to approach it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Miguel. It was a pleasure having you on. Hope to speak to you soon.
Thanks a lot. Enjoyed it.